number 3. Grass River 3 R's. Grass River Railroad. Why they didn't do G?
is, ladies and
Mics are on now. Go.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Build Show for December 2019. This will be our last Build Show for this year. I've got Ralph and Johnny as directing, as always, for this show. I'm in a different setting, as you'll see from some of the camera views here in a minute. I'm working in the garage at my office so that I can work with some larger material, do some woodworking. And this time of year, it's the only course of action I have. Working in the yard is just, I love you guys, but it's too cold. You're not worth it. So we're not working in the yard tonight. So we're going to work up here because I've been wanting to work with some of this gator board that we've talked about briefly. We're going to make some dust and some foam dust here in a few minutes as we start talking about that. So tonight's show on the 10th of December, for anybody watching after the fact, be our last build show for this year. Tomorrow night, we do have Joe Desmond has his last show for the year. He'll be going on paternity leave or maternity leave or however that works, but paternity leave afterwards, so we won't have him for the spring of 2020. We do have our own illustrious Ralph coming back with his weathering show series for some more in-depth stuff on freight car weathering, painting, and detail stuff. I personally am real excited about that too. So much so that's part of the big reason that I've changed to a more modern era recently is because of that weathering stuff. And I've ordered some scale trade stuff just so I can put some paint on cars here real soon as well. And then of course we've got Johnny's Small Trade Talk on Thursday, so a pretty full week for us here at Modern Rarity Live. Look forward to seeing all of you guys in the chat and kind of debating the different topics as always. So thanks for joining us, Ralph. Hopefully Lloyd will join us possibly here in a few minutes, but if he's going to join us, Lloyd, if you're in there, if you're over in chat or something, hop on in here. Let's talk about this stuff too. But how you doing, Ralph?
I'm doing okay, other than back pain, but I'm doing okay.
I think that comes with gray hair. There's something about the loss of pigment. Loss of pigment, loss of muscle mass that go hand in hand or something.
No, the muscle mass is still there. That's the one thing I've managed to maintain to some degree. But having a bad disc and then falling in the spring with my grandson in my arms didn't help.
So yeah, you
So
can't take it. Can't take that. One fall would put me down for weeks at a time anymore. Used to, I recovered like that. I was fine the next day, but not
I
so much.
I slipped on a wet floor and went straight down on my back, like flat.
Can't take that, man. Not anymore. None of us can.
Hey, used to do that playing hockey, so you know you kind of know how to fall, but still, as you get older, it just doesn't work the same. You're a lot heavier than you were when you were younger.
Yep.
So a lot of things happen.
But recovery time just changes considerably. So much changes as we get older. I think all of us are guilty of that. And part of the reason that this is such a good hobby for us as we age, that we can work a little slower and more cautiously compared to some of the hobbies. When I looked at getting back into a hobby, 4 or 5 years ago, when I got back into this hobby, I think I made a really, really good decision about getting back into model railroading. I had always anticipated this would be my retirement hobby, not thinking that I would get back into it, in my 30s as I did. I think it was a good decision. I think, riding motorcycles and all the other various crazy hobbies I've had are just, I'm not built for that anymore. So this hobby is much more my speed these days. So
At least you're admitting it.
uh,
You know,
make peace with who you are. People give me a hard time for being for being a loudmouth or whatever that is. I've made peace with who I am, good, bad, or indifferent. I figured it out, and made peace with it. So it's hard to hurt my feelings over stuff that I'm quite aware of, even if they are false. So we've talked about a few times briefly. We've talked about Gatorboard. I was super excited the first time I seen it. Me, Johnny, Chris Root, a few of us went to the Fine Scale Expo probably 2 years ago, and I had heard of it, I'd heard of it prior to, but I hadn't got my hands on it. And I will say to any of you guys who have heard of it and not actually seen it or put your hands on it, it defies physics to me how stout something can be that's that lightweight. It
Yeah.
seems like some space age material that they would build a spaceship out of, like it's carbon fiber or some weird material like that. It's astonishing that effectively a door skin or a single ply of Luan plywood as it is. It's a wood surface material with a foam center core. It is astonishing that it's as stout as it is. So I've got a few sheets cut down to work with. Let's just look at a couple of these. This is the sheets that I have here are in black. My fascia is black, so that makes a really good use case. This is the 1 inch thick material. It has a center core, a foam center core, with a single ply that is about as thick as shirt box cardboard or something like that.
Yep.
It's fairly thin. This is a 5 foot piece, and it has absolutely zero or very near zero deflection at 5 feet, held straight out from one end. It doesn't bend, it doesn't flex. It's incredibly rigid and solid. It doesn't bend or flex when you move it around. Yet the stuff weighs next to nothing. It, like I said, it defies principles of physics. I mean, this sheet, this is 2x6. This sheet couldn't weigh maybe a pound. I mean, maybe 2 pounds. It's spectacularly lightweight. It cuts and works real easy. It can be cut with a utility knife. We'll try that here in a few minutes because I'm pretty curious about that myself. But it also cuts with your normal woodworking tools, which is part of the reason that I really like extruded foam, the pink stuff that I've got piled up over here because we're going to work with some top scenery as well. I cut the extruded foam with a jigsaw sometimes. It's a bit messy, but I have got a jigsaw blade that is effectively a utility knife, or what I think of as a wallpaper knife. It's a straight edged breakable utility knife. I have a non-breakable segment version of this blade for the jigsaw. I bet it works really good at extruded foam or the pink or blue or green stuff. I bet it would work pretty good for this as well. Or you could run this stuff through a table saw, or I'm going to work with a utility knife and try that just because I'm curious. If not, I've got my skill saw set up with a finished blade on it so that I can make a pretty nice clean cut. I'm curious as to how each of those work because I'm wanting to play with some of this as well. I got a couple sheets because I'm really excited about getting the ball rolling on the top deck of my layout now that I've figured out how to solve some of the problems that I was having getting trades from the bottom deck to the top deck. Part of my solution was to just start running diesels all the time as opposed to the much more finicky steam locomotives. So at Gator Foam, there's a few sources. Is it Uline, ULINE.com, or it might be U-LINE.com. Just Google that. Just search for that. Uline has a dozen or a couple dozen locations across the United States that you can get that from. If you just search for Gatorboard or Gator Foam, you can find a distributor for that. Also, I'll post a link on the Facebook page after the show that is the gentleman who sells it, who put on the show or put on the clinic at the Fine Scale Expo. He sells it, although the shipping cost is somewhat high. The material is not inexpensive. It's predominantly sold by, or a lot of the sign shops will be able to get a hold of it for you. It's used for higher end signs, or raised letters are cut out of it sometimes. It's not cheap material. The 3/16, I'm sorry, the 5/16. I've seen it in 5/16, half inch, and 1 inch quite commonly, but you can get it in 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, 1.5, 2, 3, and 4 inch. I think you can even get it in a 6 inch material, but you're talking like $500 a sheet for that, for that much larger stuff. I'm not sure that any of us would have a use for that in model railroading. If anybody has an idea for that, I'm curious, just to satisfy my curiosity. This is the 1-inch material because this makes a really good base for building the complete shelf of the top deck of my layout. That's largely why I've went with a predominantly styrofoam construction method as opposed to wood construction, was to keep the deck thickness as thin as possible. This 1-inch stuff has more strength than many layers of styrofoam, more strength than a 1/2-inch MDF. The 1/2-inch MDF deflects quite a bit, so you have to support it much more often than this stuff. For building the helix or single track staging or something like that, I think the 5/16 or the 1/2-inch, depending on how large the surface area. I think maybe 1/2-inch for staging or for road bed generally. And I think the 5/16 would be great for helix material. Joey Ricard over at Trackside Scenery, go check out his YouTube channel. He definitely one of the must-watch YouTube channels for model railroaders, in my opinion. Plus, he's a character, and we enjoy characters. That's why we keep Ralph around, too. So, entirely entertaining stuff. But he's building a helix out of the 5/16 material. And he's got a full helix, 3 or 4 turns that weighs 5 pounds or something, the entirety of the helix. So, it's about, the prices that I've seen have been around between $80 and $90 for the 5/16, full 4x8 sheet of it, and around $120 to $130 for the 1/2-inch stuff. 1-inch stuff more like $160, $170. But if you compare that to just to the cost of wood for a framed out construction, they start to equal out a bit. But if you think your labor is worth anything and you'd rather spend less, if you, like me, would rather spend less time building and more time laying track, building scenery, structures, or other railroading things, I want to spend less time in the hardcore construction parts of building a layout. And this is a very quick way at a fairly insignificant, in my personal opinion, difference in L girder construction to this, plus the added benefit of you can build a deck that's literally 1 inch thick. The entirety of the deck, if you were modeling, Nebraska or something. In our case, we're going to have to put some styrofoam on it anyway, and I have a bit of an odd situation in all of the top deck on my layout, so I'm going to start with one side and kind of figure things out as I go around the layout room. But if you go to it, the link that I'll post in the chat afterwards about this, that is the model railroader who put that clinic on about it, he's used it for, and he's a side maker or otherwise sells the stuff. So not only does he get a better discount, but he probably has a lot of scraps and small pieces to work with. So him building an entire layout out of the stuff, while I'm envious, and if I had a better source for the stuff, I think I'd be more inclined to use more and more of it as well. But depending on this experience and from what I currently think, I'll build the entirety of the top deck with it. And while I'll probably stick with using wood by or dimensional lumber otherwise for staging and other such tracks, if I had a better source or more readily available, I'd use this for literally everything, road bed, staging, etc. It's just harder for me to get a hold of geographically.
Plus the expense. The cheapest way to buy it is in a carton of 5, and they're 4 feet by 8 foot sheets.
Yes.
That's the most economic way to buy it, but that's expensive as well.
Yeah, I think 4x8's about the only way. If you're going to use very much of it at all, they sell it in 2 foot by 4 foot, 2 foot by 2 foot, 4 foot by 4 foot. A bunch of those various sizes, like like you see plywood and MDF sold for at Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever. There's a lot of different size sheets of the stuff. Also, the gentleman that I'll post a link for that sells it, that's kind of model railroading suited, is also providing small pieces of the material for bar mills. So if you buy a bar mills kit that's been built here recently, he is including a small piece of gator board in the bar mills kits to build them like a diorama.
The base for the diorama.
Absolutely. So that you can build it like a diorama, which I think is, I've built most of my structures on dioramas so far. And thankfully, because as I convert to the late 80s era, many of those structures don't fit anymore. What's beautiful about that is I can pop those off and keep them, of course, but I could also go back and drop them back in again. So I'm going to keep doing that with the majority of my structures on diorama basis. And while I've been using foam or a lot of times foam core, I've been having to support that with, 1/4 inch square stock basswood to build a frame for it so the diorama has some structure. With this stuff, a piece of the 5/16 of this material, build the structure, build a little base going around it so it has something to drop into that you can scenic up to. Call it a day. The thing is incredibly stout and takes water quite well.
Yeah. And I've used it in the past. They use the 1/2 inch stuff, and it is very easy to cut with a utility knife.
That's the part I was really curious about. That's
You just have to make sure your edge that you're using, your straight edge, doesn't shift on you. Or you draw your line, and if you figure you can follow the line with the knife, that's good enough, then that'll work. That's what I did.
yeah. I'm a big fan of the straight edge. I've used this. I've been using this big 4-foot straight edge on everything I do. So
Tape it at both ends then, so it doesn't move.
yeah, that probably would have been a good idea. Yeah, and if you're putting much pressure against the actual straight edge, that might be a problem too.
Or you
You
get
need it.
you get one of the straight edges, like these rulers, the stainless steel rulers. You can get them in different sizes. They have a cork backing, and the cork
Yeah.
is good because it stops it from sliding.
I thought about putting I do like the cork backing on my, I've got a little foot long ruler and a little 18-inch ruler that have the cork backing. I've thought about getting a thin piece of cork material and putting it on the back of my 4-foot.
Use some double-sided tape to hold it on.
Absolutely. Some transfer tape or carpet tape. I think a lot of people call it carpet tape. I use transfer tape for everything in the world. Putting shingles on structures. I see that done a lot with just PVA glue or something, but I just about always use transfer tape for that. It doesn't take any pressure at all to break the initial surface on it. And I'm assuming that, like any other foam, once you're in the surface, you could about just pop the stuff, like styrene. You score it and break it.
The only thing you have to be cautious of is that you keep your utility knife perpendicular to the work, so that you get the same measurement of cut down below, instead of on a slight angle, like the blade goes down and it's angled either way.
Yep. And I find, especially with this one, this straight edge that I'm working with is like maybe an 1/8 inch thick. If I put much of an angle on the blade, it shifts the straight edge too. So I
Yep.
basically have to keep it perpendicular to keep it true. I was really curious about that.
So this is not going to be like drywall where you cut one surface and then break it. It doesn't work that way.
I didn't think it could. The bottom is quite stout too, so it would have to be that you just have to cut it through with multiple scores.
You have to score the bottom at least.
Okay.
All right, I notice we're getting a lot of buffering tonight, both Twitch and YouTube. What you can do is go to the viewer that you're watching, put your cursor on it, you'll see the red line. Go to the far right, grab the ball, and pull it back just a little bit. That kind of backs you up in the show, so it gives it time for the buffering to stop.
Yeah, and if you guys are watching on Twitch, Twitch is awesome, but you really have to have the internet speed to support that. For all the quality problems that YouTube makes us suffer with, there's a reason for it. It's much more supporting of people on slightly lower internet speeds. So if you're trying to stream the full quality on Twitch, you really need to have a good sustained 10 megabit internet speed or faster. Whereas with YouTube, as long as you got 2 or 3 megs, you're fine. But Johnny's little trick works, kind of helps you either way. So I built the entire bottom deck of my layout, as many of you guys know that have seen me or seen my layout on here. I built the entire bottom deck just with extruded styrofoam. But the way that I got the strength so that I did not have to use dimensional lumber or some other construction medium was through layers. So the bottom deck has, since it's wider, 2 feet wide, it has in many places at least 5, if not 7, 8, 9 layers, especially toward the back. It's, a foot and a half tall. That depth, it's nearly a square piece of styrofoam at that point, just kind of, or at least a triangle that's shaped off. That's where all the structural rigidity comes from. A single piece of styrofoam doesn't have, even the 2-inch stuff doesn't have a tremendous amount of structural rigidity. But as you start getting 3 or 4 ply of thickness glued together with a good rigid adhesive, it has a lot of strength. With this stuff, where my top deck is quite a bit narrower, I don't have as much. I can't ply it right. I just can't put as much styrofoam on it. I'm also trying to do some tricky stuff with the track work by hiding one of the return paths at the back of the scenery. And not only is that there causing a break in the cross section of the styrofoam, but I also need to keep the top of the mountain at least open in a few spots so that you can get in there for the obvious reasons you have to get in there, basically because of Murphy. Murphy has caused me plenty of trouble in my model railroading escapades, and I don't expect Murphy's going to quit doing so. So
he's done it for everybody.
I think it happens. So I've got to leave a few holes in there, and that just about destroys the structural rigidity. So I had bought some 1/2-inch MDF, which I like better than plywood, and we could argue plywood versus MDF, but it depends on the use case. There's a reason why they make plywood and OSB and MDF and particle board and HDPE or whatever. There's all these different materials. They all have different benefits and different pitfalls, different trade-offs. It depends on what you're doing, where the best case is. And as is usual with any of our model railroading stuff, get in a chat with a half a dozen people and you'll get at least 8 or 10 opinions on exactly what you should do or why. As always, what is it? YMMV, your mileage may vary. However, you use what works for you. In my staging, I've used 1x material. It's, shelving boards, super cheap, really nice, easy to carry in a regular car from the hardware store or from the lumber store. Suits my purposes just fine for staging, although they do have a tendency to cup slightly. So take all that into account. As always, your mileage may vary. For my top deck, I decided to use MDF as the base, where I'm going to be using this gator board. Then building styrofoam up on top of that. So the track would be on styrofoam, just like all the rest of my layout, but that MDF would give you some structural rigidity between the brackets. But in my experimentation, I had to have a bracket effectively every stud, every 16 inches, to keep that from picking up a lot of this stuff. With this, I could have a bracket probably every 4 feet. That's my thinking or my instinct. And I think you'd have that same problem with plywood. The only difference is that plywood is that it would stay relatively true for longer, but over a long enough period of time, gravity will have its way with it. And moisture. Moisture is kind of the death of plywood, generally speaking. Anyway, even osmose treated or wet treated plywood, like meant for an exterior, like a screened-in porch or something, where you might use 3/4 inch tug and groove treated material. That stuff is guaranteed to not rot for 50 years, but the glue is not guaranteed. So it may peel apart. Yeah, it'll come back.
I got a question for you from Phil Wyman. Is the Gator board the same density as XPS? I don't know what XPS is.
Okay, yeah, that's that extruded polystyrene or whatever. The guts of it is effectively the same. It feels, I can't tell you for sure, it feels slightly higher density than standard XPS,
It's
but
harder foam.
that's right. It feels like a harder density to me. Not significantly so, but at least some. Yeah, I switched cameras for you guys for just a second, so we can work, and then here in just a minute I'll work on get. Actually, I'll just switch back and forth between cameras for now. That'll be fine. Yeah, but it's slightly denser, and then it has the surface layers that are that are a wood material, but they're like a fiberboard material. And I don't know that this camera will exactly show, but let's try. So they are spectacularly thin, like I said, like a cardboard thickness. So it's not like a 1/8 inch of plywood on the top and bottom or anything. They're just, maybe a 30-second.
You can see the bubbles in the foam, the shiny inside of the bubble on the edge there.
Yep.
I have some brown stuff that might show better.
Okay, that'd be good. If you do that, I could work on the cameras for a second too.
Oh, God. There we go.
Yeah, I have to switch them back and forth to get it to bring the camera back. I have to switch it away from the camera to bring it back. They're finicky. All this stuff, I love technology, but all of it's finicky. Yeah. Yeah. I gotta switch another one too. Uh, 5/16 is the thinnest material that I've seen. To my knowledge, that's the thinnest that it's available in. So just a little better than a 1/4 inch. Which again would be. I am going to order some of that stuff, but I have to order quite a few sheets of it to get it. So I have to order like 5 sheets of that. And so I'm going to put a big bulk order together this spring when I feel like traveling. I've got to travel, take a truck. Also, it typically comes in this coloration that Ralph has. I just like the black for obvious reasons. I think I'll continue to buy it in black, but the standard is that coloration.
Yeah, I don't know whether you can see it or not, but it's in the brown format. It's like an MDF material on the top, like masonite.
Yep, it is a fiberboard, and it probably is a medium density. Actually, I think it may even be a high density.
Oh, you'd have trouble cutting it if it was high density.
Yeah, that might be true, and it does cut pretty easily. It is super thin, though.
but it's really nice stuff. Doesn't bend at all.
Yeah, it not at all. How thick is that? That's the 1/2 inch.
The 1/2 inch.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go for most purposes, unless you're trying to build, like if you're building a module, or in my case, it's the entire top shelf. That's a unique case where the 1 inch is suitable. I think the 1/2 inch would be, or maybe the 5/16, depending on the use case, would kind of be
Well,
the sweet spot for most of us.
the Star Wars diorama that I did it on this stuff.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, I think it's the way to build a diorama. And even if you play it in your layout, what I often do is cut a piece about a 1/2 inch bigger. When I'm building dioramas, I cut a piece about a 1/2 inch bigger on all 4 sides than what I want as an end result. And then I cut that 1/2 inch off, leaving it as a single, like a window frame, a single big, 1/2 inch wide square. Then I plant that 1/2 inch square into the existing scenery, and build all my scenery to that 1/2 inch, a 1/2 inch piece around it or whatever. And then that way the other piece just sits right in it like a puzzle piece. Yeah, the foam is definitely a higher density. It is harder to cut, but yeah, it's harder to cut. You have to cut all the way through it. Gosh. But you can buy a single sheet of this material. That's 12 foot of layout. My camera didn't already quit again, it looks like. So yeah, it's finicky. So here, we'll just switch it. Takes a second, but it'll load. All right. I mean, so that's 12 foot of layout. So you can buy a single sheet. This 2 foot by 6 foot piece of 1 inch material was like $40, something in that neighborhood. I don't remember exactly. But 2 foot by 6 foot piece would be around $40. That'd give you a foot wide piece for like a shelf layout down one side for $40. And that's everything you would need. A couple shelf brackets, set that on a wall, or set it on top of some IKEA shelving to make a nice frame across it. And you've got everything you would need to lay out track work on top. A little bit of extruded foam. Maybe you buy a second piece so that you could put, so you could put an L on it or something. But you've got everything you need for a switching layout without any construction. And the only tool that you need to do you can build all of your bench work with just a utility knife.
I have the Uline page for Uline Canada, and it shows you how it comes and the sizes if they want to see it.
Yeah, by
And
all means.
Uline's in the States as well. It's not just in Canada.
Yeah, they don't seem to have a whole lot of locations, but they do have one adjacent to me. And like I said, I'm going to go down there in the spring when the weather permits me driving a pickup down to haul it back. Nashville, for any of you guys that are geographically around us here in Tennessee, Nashville has one. I think Johnny had said maybe, or we had looked up, maybe Atlanta had one as well, but I don't remember. Yeah, okay, I thought we had seen that.
So the sizes that Uline has that I can see here, the thickness in white is 3/16, 1/2 inch, and 1 inch. And then in black, you have 3/16 and a half. I'm sure that you could probably get the 1 inch in black from them as well. I don't know for sure. They don't show it on the page. One carton, it's $30 per sheet, and there's 5 sheets per box.
Right. I'm going to buy 5 sheets. I'm going to buy 5 sheets of the 5/16, and I'm going to buy 5 sheets of the half. And I'm going to hope that they'll let me buy just maybe 2 sheets of the 1-inch to build some more modules on the other side of the room.
So in the 1/2 inch, you're going to have to buy 6 because they come in 3 sheets in a box. The 1-inch has 2 sheets in a box. And there's a considerable difference for size too, and price.
Yeah, I see that too.
The 4x8 sheet is in 1/2 inch is $126 a sheet. So that's $379. And then you have to pay for shipping, unless you are in the area where Uline is located, where you can
Yeah.
pick it up.
Yeah, I'm just going to drive down there because I think the shipping was going to cost me like $100 or $150 to have it shipped. So I'm gonna drive down there and pick up and get a carton of each of those sheets.
So the registered name is Gator Foam, and then it's board afterwards.
Right, and I will post about
polystyrene foam core, has solid wood fiber veneer for added strength. It's paintable. Direct digital print if you want to do that. Strong foam board available.
well, it's something to draw attention to is that the company that is making this Gator board or Gator foam is the original company to make foam core. The cardboard or shirt box core. Actually, I think it's basically foam core is mostly just poster board.
That's right.
With a thin foam guts. And they even make that up to 1/2 inch thick as well. They originally made that product many, many, many years ago, and then the patent ran out on it. And a lot of other people make a foam core board of various kinds, from Elmer's to others. I've bought it from everybody in the world, and there's a lot of difference in quality of foam core from one manufacturer to another. I buy the cheap 99-cent stuff for a lot of purposes, but for using it for structures, I buy it from Hobby Lobby because it's much, much more rigid than the cheap 99-cent Elmer's stuff or whatever you buy at the Dollar General store. They originally made that product. Now they came out with a PVC faced foam core board, the Gator foam, an aluminum skinned piece that people are building hobby aircraft out of, not RC aircraft like a human straps himself to it and flies it, kind of hobby aircraft, experimental aircraft, or ultralights. I think that would qualify as an ultralight. And the board that Miles is using for his urban backdrops or for his city backdrops, that's Citra board. Right, and it's a plastic faced material that sign manufacturers use a lot because of its high fidelity when printing on, and you can print directly on it. What a great material if you have a sign shop that can print directly on it to make you photo backdrops that are the entire backing material, the foam, the Citra and foam back that can be cut on one side and curved, and you can have your backdrop printed directly on it. So forget this wallpapering or a backdrop up. It's printed on your actual Citra backdrop, and then once it's printed on, it's water safe. So none of your scenery materials would damage it the way that a typical paper photo backdrop, you have to be super sensitive about doing scenery adjacent to it. So worth taking into account. Miles has had, really stellar results using the Citra originally for backdrop structures, but he's now building structures on his peninsula, 4-sided, 3-dimensional structures. He's building out of Citra and cutting the windows out of them and putting windows in. And that work, I've seen it in person. I know Johnny too seen it at the show in Kansas City last year, what have you. His work looks really good on camera. It photographs really well. It is incredible in person. It's truly incredible how good a print quality it is. That's made by the same manufacturer. So you can go to the same manufacturer and you can get the same basic concept of a foam center with various face materials for a host of different purposes. I don't know as a model railroader what you would do with the aluminum skinned one, but every other one, and maybe I'm just not being creative enough to think of it, but all the other ones are useful for a host of stuff from structure building to backdrops to photo backdrops to complete layout construction. And the link that I'll post that has the guy who did that clinic, he built all of his roadbed with it. Every bit of his roadbed with it, even used it to make risers.
And bridges.
Oh yeah. And actually, he had some bridges. That's what really was one of the things that was really convincing to me. I probably should have got some of those pictures ready to show you guys. I've got pictures of what he showed us, what he had on hand at the clinic. He had built some highway overpass bridges and just painted and weathered directly onto the gator board. So, it's a wood material, so there's no reason that you even have to skid it in plastic or anything to make a concrete overpass.
Right. I think right now this is it's a niche product, but once it becomes mainstream, I think the price will come down.
Yeah, when it's more readily available. The problem right now is availability, and when the availability is scarce, the cost is high. But it's a real joy to work with. I mean, being so lightweight, I brought my skill saw, and I've got a host of woodworking, tools and materials for doing wood construction. I'm not opposed to doing the woodwork, but this is a lot less like work. And that's what I like about my foam construction method that I've used on the rest of the layout. It's not like building a layout. Building a section of layout is just like building scenery. And the track is not put on wood construction and then I scenic around that. I build the scenery and then I put the track into that scenery. So it feels a lot more like building a layout, what's going to look like a layout from the get-go. It's also super fast. The styrofoam scenery method is super fast compared to, say, cardboard strip and plaster gauze, which I have nothing against. As I've said before, as all of us have said, whatever works for you, whatever makes you happy. And I actually got these originally thinking I was going to build the little O-Scale 2 rail, Proto 48 or whatever O-Scale 2 rail little project layout I'd been dreaming of, because I wanted to experiment with this. And as I decided that I could solve all my problems by just moving the diesels at HO scale, I started thinking about building the top deck with it. So I've got to get quite a bit more of it, but this is enough to build the top deck on one side of my room and get me going, and so that I could get the trades from the bottom to the top, which I had been delaying over some frustration or some problems figuring things out, and Ralph's picked on me for, and deservedly so, over not going ahead and building the helix. I'm glad I didn't, though, because I just couldn't figure out some of the problems around it. And now I've decided I have found a way to get the trades from the bottom deck to the top deck. I was really concerned about the helix because I was already having trouble getting the trades to reliably climb the grade, and adding all that curve so that the entirety of the trade was in a 30-inch radius curve. That I really expected that to be a problem, and I did a little bit of testing, and it was going to be a problem. So now I found a way to do that. Gosh, that stuff's so easy to work with. Now I found a way to do that, to climb the entirety of the grade by just going around the room behind some of the existing scenery and into my workshop room. So I can keep the climb of the grade much straighter, and I won't have all that extra curve radius, which that's something a lot of people don't take into account, and you have got to take that into account. John Allen, famous for the Gory and Defeated. All of you guys should know who he is. If you don't know who John Allen is, but you owe it to yourself to search a little online and look at some of the pictures. My opinion is his railroad has still not been surpassed yet. Even with the likes of the Franklin and South Manchester, I don't think anybody's really competed with John Allen's layout. And I think it burnt down in the early 80s, so it's been gone a long time.
It's said that some of the scenery and paraphernalia from John's layout is in a box sitting under Cody Grivno's desk.
So from Andy Sprandio. So Andy Sprandio cut his teeth originally hanging around with John Allen when he was like a 20-year-old Navy sailor. Early in the hobby. What a great experience to get into the hobby with John Allen being one of your first serious exposures to layout construction and operations. And I know there's one of the Gory and Defeated locomotives is on display at the Model Railroader facility, and I think there might be one at Walther's too, or I'm pretty sure there is one at one of those places. One of the original locomotives that was on a workbench at somebody else's house and was not there for the fire. Also, this works really good for my construction thinking. So, which I know will find funny if you haven't already heard my argument about this, but even as a computer guy, I don't love designing layouts in CAD. To each their own, and I think you probably owe it to yourself to do some work in CAD to get some ideas. But when I'm shaping out, I like to be able to lay it out at some kind of full size, get a rough idea, get down, shape up some of the mountains and get down at eye level and try to figure out the viewing angles. And I know the 3D software has came a long way to get 3D, but you just can't experience the layout in the same way as you can designing one-to-one on top of a surface, from my personal opinion. This is one of these that I have to figure out because I have to hide a track at the back. So I have to build up mountains in front of it, have a couple tracks in front for a small town called, this is the Russell Creek Ranch. This is Virginia City, small town with a loader, a couple turnouts in the middle. But there's a hidden track that is the return path for the top deck's return path back to get back to staging. This also, through all this discovery, not only did I find a way around requiring the helix that was messing with my scenery so much. I didn't mind the helix so much other than it caused some problems climbing the grade, and I wasn't sure about the reliability of running helpers, pushers, and pushing a train up a helix. That's, that really concerned me. Now I can do that on a straight section of grade. We're going to go all the way down a 30-foot wall, turn back, all the way up a 30-foot wall again, back to the top deck, and then this return path to get you back down again. This also kept me from having to hide a staging in the kitchen, and this lets me get my return path back behind the layout and back down into the other room without having to have a stub-in staging hidden inside a ceiling beam in the kitchen, which is craziness. It was going to work. I swear it was going to work. I swear it was a good idea when it was the best idea I could come up with. but it was the best I could think of. So. Now, my personal preference for design, and how I designed all the top deck or all the current level of my layout, was design everything on on craft paper or what do you call that stuff? I think it's called craft paper.
Yep.
Just brown craft paper. I think you did too, didn't you, Ralph?
I did. I taped it on my wall, and I laid it out exactly where my bench work was going to be and everything.
Yep. It lets you get a full-size view of what your layout is going to look like. You can lay your track work out. So what I'll do is, what I did on the previous sections was I laid craft paper down on the floor in the living room. My wife loved it. And then I used what we affectionately call Smurf tube, but it's a blue flexible conduit, plastic flexible conduit. Comes in a roll. I bought a roll of it, like 75 or 100 feet, probably 100 feet, for relatively cheap. And it's 1.1 inches. It's an inch interior dimension, so 1.1 inches, which is pretty much exactly the width, end of tie to end of tie of HO Scale Flex Track. So I took that stuff, I laid it out, I got my radiuses right. It helps you make easements because just like the bent stick method, the bent stick method for making easements is just to bend the stick around your radius, bend it out your radius, and then just let it come back to straight, and it will naturally find what is basically an easement or a fixed radius to an infinite radius, or if you're not a mathematician, infinite radius means straight. By the way, the railroad never calls it straight. They call it tangent track, but everybody has a different name for the same thing, straight. But it will find its way back to straight, and it'll make your easements. Well, by all means, you can do the complex calculus to figure that out. I've done it and just compared it to what I currently have with a bent stick method, and I don't see that the difference is significant at all. I mean, I was off by like a 1/16 of an inch in the middle of the curve. That was it. So the blue Smurf tube helps you find that natural easement that I just traced on both sides of it, and I had the exact layout for where the flex track went. Then I took turnout templates, printed turnout templates out from fasttracks.com. Even if you're not using Fast Tracks turnouts, if you're using Kato or right, same thing.
Yep.
Print them out, tape them together, and cut them out so you have turnouts. Even if you're not using, if you're using Kato or Microengineering or Walther's turnouts, a number 6 turnout is essentially a number 6 turnout. There might be a little difference in how long it is past the end of the points or beyond the frog. You can make all that up in your flex track, but you can cut out a couple, templates for everything. Take your templates, take your blue Smurf tube, lay out where your turnouts are going to go. This lets you look at a regular turnout in full size that you can take down and leave in place. So even after I used them to lay everything else out, I took the paperwork, I took the blue Smurf tube and bent all my curve radius. Of course, you could also just take flex track, lay flex track out and mark both sides of the flex track as well. Effectively give you the same thing. A good thing about using blue foam or something like that is that you can use T-pins to just pin it down. So as you take a look at it, for that matter, you could pin your flex track down, push the pins home. You could even run trains on it for a little while and test it and see if you like the design. This lets you satisfy one of the considerations that Bill Baronic has mentioned, and it's a great point that I totally agree with Bill on, that it's really tough to design a freelance layout from scratch that will operate correctly. I have a benefit. My layout is based on a prototype. I just do whatever the Norfolk and Western did when they built the track work. I know it is operatable, that it has all the track work that's required to do the job because the Norfolk and Western and Norfolk Southern operated on exactly that amount of track work for 100 years, still operate on it today, and it does the job just fine. But if you're freelance designing a layout, you can't always be sure that you won't need an extra crossover or an extra turnout or another stub track to throw a few cars in order to switch a particular industry. If you're designing freelance, you've got to test all this stuff. What we used to do many, many years ago, prior to computer design, when I had less gray hair, was we would draw it out on paper and use coins, pennies, or whatever, and basically operate it by moving the cars around, like a role playing game on paperwork, like playing a game of Risk on your track plan, which is basically what operations is anyway. It's Risk with less guns and bombs and political fiascos. And it's effectively a big role-playing game. So we would put coins on it and operate around to make sure that you could get the cars there. That doesn't test track lengths and other considerations, but it lets you know what the operations will flow like. There's software that lets you do that today, but that's one area where I think the software has not fully kept up with as of yet. If you could visualize it in your mind, you could put it all into JMRI's operations program, and you can operate your layout without having the layout first. I've done that. It was kind of a testimony, or it was kind of a testament to patience to be able to get through it, though. It's a little frustrating, but you could do that. What you get by laying it out and T-pinning it down to styrofoam or gator board and operating it is that you actually can test everything, see if it's operatable, especially if you're building a small switching layout. Pin the stuff down, run some trades, see if it works, see if you like it, pull the pins up, change it around a bit, get something you like, and then glue the stuff down and go about scenery and all that stuff. So what I did on my initial layout and what I'm going to, or on the current level, and what I'm going to do on this here is I laid out everything on brown paper. I put the blue Smurf tube or flexible conduit or flex track would do the job just fine. I laid it all out and marked it all out the way I wanted it to get the right plan. Then I took and cut. So I ended up with, say, you got your spacing for your track work. You're going to need a little bit of road bed room on either side as well. So I added a 1/2 inch to each side, give or take. So I ended up with 4 lines. The 2 pieces where the flex track goes, the 2 outside lines giving you a 1/2 inch so you can put road bed slope and everything. Then I cut that out I cut it out with directly on the styrofoam in my case. On the gator foam, I'll do something slightly different, but I cut it out with a utility knife. And then I used that piece of brown paper strip, and I took that and laid that on top of the Homosote to cut the Homosote road bed. You could, if you were not using Homosote or something, you could skip doing that and just cut your lines through. And then a black marker, a Sharpie, will follow those little cuts in the styrofoam perfectly so that you can figure out exactly where to lay your cork or foam road bed. Now, I am going to use flex track on the top deck of my layout. I may come back and hand lay later, but I'm kind of doubting it, especially in this section, the branch line where the track work is under a coal loader. It'll all be flex track because it'll all be covered in coal. Ralph turned us on to this stuff, and this is the bee's knees. Ralph's layout's built with the same stuff, or much of it, right?
All of it.
And it's a pipe insulation. It's self-adhesive on one side, so you peel this off and it's self-adhesive, so it lays like nothing. No caulk, no glue, no pinning it and weighting it. Peel the adhesive off, stick the stuff down, lay track on it right afterwards. Again, you could lay this stuff down and pin the track straight back on top of it and operate it again like we were saying before. This is a roll that come in a 2-inch width that I just laid it out on a piece of shelving board and cut it down to a 1-inch width. It's better for me. But I think a roll of this is like 20 feet long. And something right.
The ones I get is 15.
Yep. Yeah. So 15, 20 feet long, or whatever length it come in, 15 feet or whatever. You get twice as much because you cut it to 1-inch width. So you get 30 feet or 40 feet for $10 or less. I paid $10 for this, and I've tested it. I ran trades. What is it?
It's 30 feet, and I paid $15 for 30 feet.
Right, and the U.S. prices, because the Canadians always pay more for some reason, but
so it's going to be cheaper.
That's right.
About $11, $12 maybe.
Yeah, Menards has it for $10 for basically the same thing you're getting there. Cut it in half, so you're getting 60 running feet for $10. You surely can't buy cork for anything close to that. And I have tested it. I had laid the track out and used thumbtacks so I could run trades in staging and see if my plan worked, just like I recommended to you guys. And I'd run trades on top of the shelving boards, and of course they're loud. It was track on, not even glued down, which is going to make it, make the sound transfer even better. I had ran trades over it, and it was loud, significantly loud. I put this stuff down under it, and it is deader than homicide. And the reason I use homicide is that it is so much more sound dead or sound dampening than cork is. Cork has some other side benefits for cosmetic or scenery reasons, and if you love cork, by all means use it, whatever works. But this is super cheap, and it's incredibly sound dampening.
It's originally designed to wrap refrigeration piping for air conditioners.
Okay, that makes sense. I was curious. You said it was a pipe insulator, and I knew it was thinner than any of the stuff that I've used for pipe insulation.
I would never have known about it if I didn't use it at work. I figured this looks like the stuff that Woodland Scenics has, but Woodland Scenics stuff is real slippery. That there's got some good heft to it.
Yeah, and honestly, I did that when I first looked at the Woodland Scenic stuff. My gut instinct was to not like it, but I've listened to several people who've used it and loved it, including Phil Wyman, who used it. No, I'm sorry, Phil Wyman, I think used cork, or no, maybe he did use it. Regardless, DeBob, DeBob uses it in scale and uses the Woodland Scenics foam, and has talked real kindly about it. I'm encouraged, especially after trying this. I think it's probably the preferable commercial model railroad supplier type of road bed.
The problem is, and this is a lot of things, the plaster cloth that the Woodland Scenic sells. If you go to an art supply store, like a true art supply store, you can get plaster cloth at about 30% of the cost that you pay for the Woodland Scenic stuff.
Oh,
and
yes.
you can get it in various widths.
Well, I used plaster cloth a lot of years ago, long before any of the hobby providers had it. And we went to a medical supply place, like walked in the stores where they sell walkers and oxygen tanks and bought it.
And it's relatively cheap that way.
Absolutely.
So this foam that Woodland Scenics has, it's okay, but it's not, you're not getting your dollar value from it.
I don't think it's that dissimilar to this stuff, short of the fact that it has roadbed slopes carved into it. And I don't see that as a significant benefit.
It doesn't have a glued backing. It's a slippery, like a real funny foam. It's not the same as that foam.
That means it's going to be a lot harder to adhere ballast to or something. This stuff's got a nice, and something that I love about this is that it's designed to deal with water and not be water soluble by any measure. So soaking it with glue, if you use a traditional ballast gluing method, by soaking it with alcohol or wet water and then glue to adhere the ballast down, will not degrade this sound dampening property significantly. That's my argument. That's my problem with cork road bed. When you soak it down with wet water and then soak it down with glue, the cork becomes hard as a rock. Go peel up a piece of track or the end of a siding or something that you laid just a year ago. It's not about it drying out over decades. That's been soaked with glue. Or take a little piece, soak it with glue, give it a couple of days to dry, and see how hard and brittle it is. And if it's hard, it cannot be significantly sound dampening. It has to stay somewhat soft to be sound dampening.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, we've covered an hour just talking about this material, a little bit of cutting on this. I'll make a little progress, and then we'll circle back. As a side note, we're going to be doing something different in January, starting something in the first of the year. But we'll circle back and touch back on some of these modules after I've got them in place, so you guys can see what they look like up hanging with no support under them at all. Right now it's all theory, but when you see them in the air with nothing more than a $2 shelf bracket holding them up, I think you might be inclined to experiment and try them for a shelf layout or an experiment, an extension to your layout, or maybe just staging. But it's a spectacular product to try for a host of reasons, even if you don't go as crazy as I have and commit to it as an entirety of a layout construction, medium. But it suits my case.
Right. So don't forget, we got a show tomorrow night.
Got Joe Desmond's show tomorrow night. Yep, 9 o'clock. Actually, for all of our shows are 9 o'clock now, including the Thursday night Johnny's Talk Show that was formerly at 10 o'clock Eastern Time. That's now 9 o'clock. All of our shows are at 9 o'clock. All live shows. So tomorrow night with Joe Desmond. Thursday night, as always, with Johnny. And I'll see you guys there for that. Also, look forward to a bunch of stuff coming at the first of the year. We've got several new shows and several new concepts that we're kicking off. And we're bringing back Ralph for making cars dirty. Like we need more of that stuff.
And when I did my last show, I promised I was going to do 2 locomotives from start to finish and show how it's done. So that's where I'm
Awesome.
going to start.
That's awesome. I look forward to that. And I've got a bunch to do as well now that I'm kicking off into the 1980s or quote unquote modern-ish era. So look forward to all that stuff. We'll see you guys again tomorrow night and again on Thursday night. And then we'll see you guys first of the year as we come back for the Build Show and a few other shows, with our group and me and Ralph involved in some of those shows as well. So see you guys again. If I don't see you before then, have a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. You guys be safe with the cold weather too.